Major support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Colonial Life, providing benefits to employees to help them protect their family, their finances, and their futures. High Point University, the premier life skills university, focused on preparing students for the world as it is going to be. And Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Welcome to the most widely watched and longest-running dialogue about Carolina business, policy, and public affairs that's seen every week across North and South Carolina. I'm Maura Quinn, sitting in for Chris William. It's already midsummer, and while it's really not a normal vacation year by any means, many of you have already planned or maybe even taken a trip, probably one that's close to home. At least that's what our guests are hoping. Dwayne Parrish is director of South Carolina's Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, and Whit Tuttle is executive director of Visit NC. We'll talk to both about Carolina travel and tourism in just a moment. Stay right there.
Gratefully acknowledging support by Martin Marietta, a leading provider of natural resource-based building materials, providing the foundation upon which our communities improve and grow. Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, an independent licensee of the Blue Cross and Blue Shield Association. Visit us at southcarolinablues.com. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Barings, a leading global asset management firm dedicated to meeting the evolving investment and capital needs of its clients. Learn more at barings.com. On this edition of Carolina Business Review, Dwayne Parrish from the South Carolina Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, and Whit Tuttle of Visit NC.
And welcome to Carolina Business Review. The hospitality and tourism industry has taken such a hard hit in the wake of COVID-19 from one end of the Carolinas to the other for so many reasons, not just COVID-19. There have been a lot of other things that have really added to the hits. Our two guests are going to help us unpack all of the issues around this, some of them new, some of them old, and some of the hopes for a runway to recovery. So we have Dwayne Parrish, who is the director of the South Carolina Department of Parks, Recreation, and Tourism. And we also have Whit Tuttle, who is the executive director of Visit NC. They are really good friends of the show. They've been on many times, and they have a lot of expertise in this area. Welcome, gentlemen. So glad to have you.
Thank you.
So we've seen a lot of changes in both Carolinas, even in the last few days. Lots of things have happened. The Carolina tourism industry has just taken so many hard hits from stay-at-home orders and beyond. Nearly employees in this industry have lost their jobs. How would you both describe things today? And Dwayne, we'll start with you, if that's okay.
Sure. Just a little quick background. We started out the year actually ahead of the prior year. We thought 2020 would be another record year. And then obviously things took a turn south at the beginning of March. We saw it sort of bottom out middle of April. We started that really what I think is a crawl, walk, run process to come back. We're probably at the end of the crawl phase and starting to walk a little bit. We've seen some increases, particularly in the drive market where we're headed. Whit and I are both fortunate that a lot of our visitors drive to the state. In a time like this, that's very helpful. But we have a long way to go, but we're going the right direction, and I can see light at the end of the tunnel for the first time, quite frankly, in a month or so, in several months.
Yeah. And Whit, how about you?
Yeah, it's been a tremendous hit for us. Tourism is a $26 billion industry in North Carolina. We've lost about $6 billion in visitor spending, which equates to about $200 million in state tax revenue and about $150 million in local tax revenue. So it's really tough. At one point we were down 77, 78% of where we would normally be. And we've seen unemployment rates in the tourism industry as high as 48%. there. So it's been a really tough time. We hit a wall and tourism just stopped. We talk a lot about what life would look like without tourism, and unfortunately we got to see it the first part of this year. But now I think we're coming back. As Dwayne said, we're starting to walk. We're trying to take it right and open in the right way, and I think we're getting there.
So the governor in North Carolina instituted a mandatory mask order. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? And we're going to see if South Carolina might be considering that as well.
Yeah, we think it's a good thing. You know, we've done some national research. We've been polling people for traveler mindset every week, and one of the things that I think we saw is that about 55% of the people said they would prefer more people wearing masks. And so, you know, I think it's a good thing. I think but one of the big problems we're seeing is fear. People are afraid to travel, and they're afraid to have visitors come into their communities. So I really think anything we can do to take away that fear and ease people's minds will help. And if it's wearing a mask or making sure you're keeping the social distance, I think any of that stuff is important.
Dwayne, what do you think? South Carolina might consider something like that or not?
Well, the governor would rather it be industry born. We've had a lot of programs like the South Carolina Restaurant Lodging Association has a program that restaurants sign a pledge, basically agreeing to do certain things, one of which is staff wearing a mask, and some of those other programs. But individual cities have passed some mask ordinances, like Charleston, Columbia, and Greenville have passed them where a requirement wearing masks in public. So we have some of that going on now. The mask is quickly becoming the like the TSA was after 9/11, making it safe to travel, safe to fly. The mask is sort of becoming the symbol of making it safe to go out and do things, whether it's a hotel, attraction, restaurant, and the like.
So you talked a little bit about the market and the restaurants. So are individual industries, individual restaurants, individual cities, are they beginning to do things that, like some restaurants saying, no, thank you for saying we can open, but we're not going to? So is the industry beginning to kind of police itself and make its own decisions regardless of what the government says, regardless of what the governors, regardless of what the cities say? Are some of these industries specific restaurants, hotels, are they making their own decisions about what they should do, knowing that if they open, close, open, close, open, close, that's almost worse than not opening or opening slowly?
It is.
Or Dwayne, go ahead, Dwayne.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it is. That's exactly what's happened. I think the industry is in sort of the new norm, if you will, has sort of policed themselves a little bit, still trying to figure out what that is. You know, social distancing, keeping staff and employees wearing masks, those kinds of, and the smart operators are doing that. But once we reopen businesses, you know, the cows that left the barn, as they speak. And so it's difficult to go back and close. And you're right, you don't want to open, close. That makes does not do anyone any good. But I think, you know, most things in our state are open. We still have large event venues like concert venues, movie theaters, live performance theaters are not open yet. But most everything else is in place with obviously new social distancing protocols and things of that nature are, and most of the operators are practicing that, because quite frankly, with social media today, the consumer can police you if you don't do it yourself.
Yeah, that's true. Whit, how about you? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I would say, you know, the businesses are businesses. They've got to make money. So we've had some restaurants and other businesses that could open that have said they're not going to open yet, either because they don't think they can be profitable under the current restrictions, or because you know, they don't think they can keep their staff safe and healthy. So we have some that haven't, but many of them are. Most of our restaurants are open. We've done a program called Count on Me NC, where there's actual guidelines that people can take. It's a pledge consumers can take, but we also have a side of that for businesses. And we've had some courses designed by North Carolina State University that talk about clean sanitation, proper hygiene, and ways to run a business. So our tourism businesses can take those courses, and then they become Count on Me NC certified. And you can go to countonmenc.org, and you can find out which businesses have taken that. So we're trying to take all these measures to make people feel as safe and comfortable as possible.
So do you think that some of these hospitality and tourism leaders and operators, are counting you among them, are having a little bit of a difficult time walking that line between being responsible voices for state leadership, responsible voices for opening, not opening, when there are other businesses that are just rushing to open. We've got to open, we've got to make money. We saw an early dash to normalcy in Myrtle Beach and Charleston, Wilmington, Asheville, Raleigh, even some places in Charlotte. People are not shy about congregating. It's a little bit of a tough line to walk. Whit?
Yeah.
Start with you. How tough is it to walk?
It's very delicate. You know, there's never been anything like this. You know, businesses have to run and people have jobs, and we've seen what this does to the economy. So, you know, there's a need to get this back open for everybody's sake. But as we said, you know, what you don't want to do is do it too quickly, do it wrong, and then have to go back to square one all over again, because then I don't know that a lot of these businesses can come back.
Dwayne?
Yes, I agree with Whit. There's not a playbook for this. This is all new. It's a fine line for people to walk. I think the business operators are still sort of figuring that out, but we're in a better place than we were 30 days ago, whether it's social distancing. And I think the consumer is starting to figure this out more too. They take it more seriously now. I see more consumers wearing masks when they go out. It is just, you know, it's an adaptation period that we're sort of in right now. But I think we'll work through this, and as we go through this crawl, walk, run processing, we'll come out of the other side okay.
Yeah. So are you starting to see some encouraging signs, like short-term rentals maybe coming back? Are you starting to see people starting to come back? What are the encouraging signs that you're starting to see, Dwayne?
We've seen, you hit the nail on the head, Mark. I mean, short-term rentals have done pretty well through this whole thing. I mean, they were doing pretty well before COVID hit. And because of, I think, the space and square footage they offer, and especially in kitchens, people that need to stay somewhere for a while are in that mode where short-term rentals are very attractive. Extended stay products in the hotel market, like Residence Inn, have fared better than standard hotels. But the hotel chains, you know, like Marriott and Hilton, have come out with cleaning protocols, sealing doors, and those kinds of things that have made them look attractive as well. So I think it's just a matter, as I mentioned before, about people feeling safe in the new norm, consumers out traveling. But it's a different time. I mean, it's a different time. You know, it used to be you wanted the maid to come in, or the room attendant to come in every day and clean your room. Now you really don't want anybody coming in your room. So things have just changed a lot.
Yeah, Whit, how about you?
Yeah, we're seeing some really strong business. When things open back up, I had one of our major vacation rental companies told me they had 4 of the strongest days in their history in bookings right after Memorial Day. So the mountains and the coast, we're seeing a lot of great leisure travel. And I think, you know, North Carolina and South Carolina, we're positioned well for the type of vacations people want to take sort of in this COVID world. You know, we have the outdoors, we have the scenery, we have the beaches. That's what people want. And so we're seeing really strong pickup there. We're just not getting into more urban areas, and meetings and conventions, you know, they're just not happening. They're not allowed to happen. So we're struggling from that point. But on the leisure side, I think we're doing fairly well. And I think we'll continue to.
So how long of a trajectory is this realistically for a rebound in tourism? It has taken such a deep blow, and not just tourism short-term, people going into the outdoors, but you mentioned meetings and conventions. That has been a deep blow. And travel, just travel. How long and how difficult a road back will this be realistically? What do you think, Whit?
Yeah, I think we'll get back 80–90% of where we were pretty quickly. People want to travel. We're primarily leisure destinations. Dwayne mentioned earlier, we're primarily drive markets. That's all going to come back. The challenge is that last 15–20%. I just don't know that we're going to be able to do that without big meetings, conventions, or, you know, the density that we need to really get back to the levels we were before. So I think it's going to be a long time before we get to 100%.
How long a time are you thinking? What kind of timeline do you really have when you guys sit together, when you and your team sit together? What kind of timeline are you thinking?
Well, I think we're talking years, not months, until we get back to 100%.
Okay. Dwayne, how about you?
Yeah, Whit's right. The corporate traveler is not back yet. including meetings and conventions. They're just not, the leisure traveler has come back quite a bit. As Whit mentioned, there was a lot of cabin fever being locked down for a couple of months. We saw that right after some things opened up in early May, and we're seeing that now even through June. Whit's right. I think by the end of this calendar year, we should be close to 80–90% of where we were before. That last 10 to 20%, though, is the profitability for many hotels and attractions and restaurants. And so that's important. We get that part back. You know, a lot of that will depend on the vaccine, obviously. Air traffic will have to come back. People have to feel safe to fly again. I think as this thing works just through itself, people are becoming more and more comfortable. You know, the percentage of people who are willing to go out to eat in a restaurant 30 days ago was much lower than it is today. So we hope that trend continues as we go through this.
So much of what is happening here is driven by psychology, by how people feel. Do they feel safe? Do they feel like they can do these things? And how much of an impact does it have when we see things like the Northeast states, a whole group of Northeast states saying that travelers from the Carolinas will have to do a 14-day quarantine before they can even come to their states. So what kind of psyche, what kind of impact does that have on the psyche of the people in the Carolinas, do you think, of travelers, of people who are thinking about traveling out and people who are thinking about traveling in? Does that impact at all those kinds of messaging that we're getting?
Well, I think for us, for people coming into South Carolina or North Carolina, you know, that doesn't help us any, obviously. I mean, I would much rather see political leaders talk about traveling safe, regardless of where you go, wearing a mask, social distancing, those things that people are just now starting to learn to do on a regular basis. You know, it doesn't help anyone when states are singled out, because quite frankly, you can get it anywhere. But nonetheless, it has a negative impact. You know, you don't want to see that. I sort of look at some of this that where the virus is much like a hurricane in some respects. We still market, we just market around it. We can't control it. And it's the same way with a hurricane or potential hurricane, whether it hits, it doesn't hit, the damage it does or doesn't do. We just sort of have to work around that. And this is a similar situation, except it's a much longer period of time.
Yeah. Whit, how about you?
Yeah, I think we send more New Yorkers come down here to vacation than we send up to New York. So, and I don't see the difference between a New Yorker who's been in North Carolina and a North Carolinian going up to New York. So I think a lot of that is politics, but it is dangerous for us because people are monitoring social media and they're watching the news, and we see it. People, as the things are getting better, people get more comfortable about traveling. When they see stories about spikes in coronavirus, people get less comfortable about traveling and more nervous. So I think things like that don't really help because it's a unified approach. I mean, a visitor that drives I-95 is going through a bunch of different states. And so it doesn't matter where they're from, it's really where they've been that's more important.
Yeah. So both of you monitor what's happening in tourism and recreation all across both Carolinas. Are there things that you're seeing in individual communities and individual places that you say, wow, that is really creative, that is innovative. Somebody there is really thinking and doing something that's going to really lead us. Those people are leaders. What are some of the things that are happening in some of these communities that are innovative? And
well, I'll tell you something I think is great that was done. We were just talking with somebody from Burke County in North Carolina, and they've done a thing where they're calling streeteries. So they've taken a big part of their main street and they've blocked it off and allowed the restaurants to come out and use that capacity into the street to be able to serve more people and serve them outside in a safe and socially distant way. So I think that's a neat way towns are adjusting and trying to help the tourism businesses out and do it in a safe and responsible way.
Great. And Dwayne, have you seen some innovative things that communities are doing across South Carolina?
I have. Something similar to what Whit talked about. A lot of our restaurants have used the sidewalk outside to expand outdoor capacity. It's a time of year where people want to be outdoors, not to mention the cabin fever they have after being locked up for a few months. And so the innovative restaurants, the innovative areas in downtowns have done some of those kinds of things. But also those that offer outdoor spacing, you think about parks, think about hiking, those kinds of things where a lot of outdoor space is available. That's where they've really pushed the envelope and had more people. We've had some of our trails in the upstate in Table Rock State Park. We've had some trails where we had the highest number of hikers in the month of May and June ever in the history of the trails. Our state parks had the busiest month it's ever had in the month of May. That is a combination of the time of year, wanting to be outdoors, wanting big space, and then the cabin fever of being locked up for a while. I think people are wanting to go out and go to wide open places, and communities sort of embraced that, and people have opened up to that.
So I want to ask you a question that's kind of based in what's really happening now, and that's part of both states' tourism is really based around history, and a lot of that is around Confederate history. What is the impact of a lot of the angst and a lot of the work that's being done around Confederate history in our states? Confederate monuments are coming down in cities around both of our states. What is the impact on historic tourism in both states? And I'll start in South Carolina, Dwayne.
Sure. Well, Charleston's our most historic city. Not only just during the Civil War, but also during the Revolutionary War. There are a tremendous number of battle sites from both the Revolution as well as the Civil War that took place. History is a part of why people come to South Carolina and North Carolina. I think that will continue. It's always important to tell the story. I think a lot of our places throughout the South, in both of the Carolinas, do a good job of telling the story, but I think today more of them are being more inclusive in what they tell about the past, be it good, bad, or ugly. I think that's changing, and that's what's different from today versus 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah, Whit?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think we're better off telling a more inclusive and complete story. And if people appreciate history, they'll appreciate that part of it too. And I think that's a side that's been underserved and hasn't really been told. It's interesting. We have a program, and several states do it. It's Civil War Trails. And people asked us, well, are we going to stop that program? And we said, no, we just, the main thing is to tell the whole story. And we felt that program is telling that entire story of what happened. And I think it's important to remember your history, but it's important to remember all sides of it.
Yeah. And along those lines, diversity in tourism, there have been a lot of racial tensions in the United States, to say the least. The travel industry is paying attention to that. So do you think that all people feel safe when traveling? Are you approaching the issue of racial equality when it comes to tourism? Are you talking to operators? Are you talking to hotels? Are you talking to people in these towns about racial equity in tourism? Is that something that's come up? How about Whit?
Yeah, I think it's really has emerged as an issue. And it's an issue in tourism. I think we've seen it before that it is underrepresented. So we've tried to do some things working with our HBCUs here in North Carolina, and we're trying to get better about it. I think it's a challenge the industry faces across the nation.
Okay, Dwayne?
Along the same lines, I think the tourism industry is making more of a concerted effort to recruit more minorities, more African Americans. I think that will help as time goes by. Certainly tourism is a great place that we want to welcome everybody. We just see one color, and that's green. That's the almighty dollar. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what it's about. And so we want to attract everyone, whoever that may be. And we've got wonderful things to see in both states, wonderful things to do, great, wonderful places to eat, historic sites, beaches, golf, mountains, small cities. There's so many wonderful things to see. We think we can attract everyone of all stripes, if you will, to both the Carolinas. And I think that as far as feeling safe, I would hope so. In today's world, I think it is. I mean, I've been around throughout the state, and it seems to be, certainly from my standpoint.
And a final question from me is the CARES Act. There's been a lot of relief that has been pumped into these different industries. Has it made a big difference, Dwayne?
Yes, I think the CARES Act has brought more testing, has brought more medical care, brought more attention to the virus. It's also helped replenish, if you will, cities, counties, and the state in regard to our costs associated with that. Obviously, tax revenues are down. That's made a big impact. And if nothing else, it allows us to do some of the normal things like Whit and I do in terms of marketing promotion, allows us to do those things and not have as many cuts as we would have otherwise.
Okay, and Whit, quickly?
Yeah, it's been huge in providing that stimulus back to the economy when we really needed it. And a really great thing is they've now come out and said that a lot of the local tourism offices are eligible for this. Because one of the biggest challenges we're having is, well, right now everybody needs to be out there marketing, but many of these local tourism offices, convention and visitors bureaus, and chambers of commerce, they're funded on occupancy tax, and they're not getting any of that occupancy tax. So when they need to market the most, they've got the least amount of resources to do it. So I really think that the CARES Act funds have been crucial to our recovery and will continue to be.
I want to thank both of you for tackling this issue with us. It is one that is of great interest to everyone in North and South Carolina because it impacts so many people who work, who live, so many in this state. Thank you for taking the time to unpack it for us. I want to thank both of you, Dwayne and Whit, for joining us. I know the men and women in the hospitality and tourism industry will stay safe. On behalf of Chris and the entire team at Carolina Business Review, stay safe and well. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review provided by High Point University, Martin Marietta, Colonial Life, the Duke Endowment, Barings, Grant Thornton, Sunoco, Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina, and by viewers like you. Thank you.